I've been a lawyer, a public international lawyer to be more precise, for long decades. But over the years, starting I suppose with the end 1980s when I was appointed second track negotiator on behalf of the churches of Jerusalem during the inglorious Oslo process, I've also become a student of politics. And since then, I've observed, read, consulted associates, analyzed, and commented on the conflicts of the MENA and Gulf regions. Iraq, Libya, Palestine, the GCC spat, Tunisia, Syria, and most recently, the horrific war in Gaza. It's been quite an education. And today, in June 2025, I stare once more, woefully, dolefully, blankly even, at the latest Israel-Iran war, which started on Friday, the 13th of June, in itself an unlucky day in Western culture. And I am angry at human nature that causes so much damage. So allow me to share with you today a few salient snapshots of what I'm wrestling with every day, starting with the latest tragedy unfolding over the heads of many Iranians. 1. Do remember the P5+1, headed by the USA, had already been signed with Iran in July 2015. This had halted Iranian nuclear ambitions, and I'd argue even that we wouldn't be in this violent mess today had President Trump not withdrawn from the agreement in May 2018, largely because of pressure from Israel and also a few Arab allies. And despite his lofty promises before becoming president again, he has failed to negotiate a JCPOA Mark II because the meetings have been adversarial, fickle, focusing on win-lose solutions, and with the shadow of Prime Minister Netanyahu lurking in the background. The popular expression goes, don't fix it if it ain't broke. But clearly, this adage isn't an American one these days. 2. Today, many pundits suggest that Iran might well have signed an agreement had there not been ultimatums, and had the Iran-Israel war not checkmated the meeting in Muscat, the Sultanate of Oman, that could have been crucial in dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Frankly, I don't know if the meeting will have been decisive or merely a red herring to justify this war. But we could have tested it if we really believed in peace. Instead, we now discuss the deathly uncertainty of more wars. 3. A bit of political sophistry here, if you allow me. Since Israel attacked Iran a few days ago, many Western politicians and some media outlets are issuing statements of support for Israel and arguing that the Jewish state has the right for self-defense. I concur. Israel has every right to defend itself. But do I need to remind listeners that it wasn't Iran but Israel that started this war? And do I need to add that Israel is not facing existential threats from Gaza, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, or anyone else in the MENA region, as its Prime Minister Netanyahu claims every day? 4. And what are the Israeli goals from this war? It started with a stated aim of degrading Iran's nuclear capabilities. Then it morphed into a conventional war, and now the Israeli Prime Minister urges Iranians to opt for regime change. Close your eyes, and you can see that this pattern was already applied in Gaza since 20 months ago. Close your eyes even more tightly, and memories could come flowing back of the first Gulf War of 1991, when the Iraqi president and regime were allowed to stay in power within a battery of sanctions. Or the US ill advised invasion in 2003, when its toxic consequence was the birth of ISIS. I'll be candid, even at the expense of annoying some listeners. Forgive me. I'm not a fan of the mullahs in Iran. I'm allergic to theocracies, ideologies, or dictatorships that come under different guises. And remember also, I'm an Armenian who hails originally from the Levant, so I know a thing or two about such things. Nor do I dispute for 1 minute that the regime in Iran has run the country down and that many Iranians are sick to the teeth with them. But what I'm seeing emerge today in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and now in Iran is an Israeli grand plan to redraw the whole Levant, whereby Israel becomes the king and therefore also the kingmaker. When you think of Iran today, think also of Gaza, where the carnage continues and Palestinians are dying every single day. Is this perchance a different version of Sykes-Picot? It unsettles me greatly to see that we in the West talk the talk, but don't also walk the walk. But enough of that. Let me get a little more conceptual now. As a public international lawyer for whom the law and the rule of law both remain uppermost, and as someone who also practices alternative dispute resolution, in other words, mediation, conciliation, etc., what I've witnessed over these years is the deliberate and untrammeled fragmentation of international law over and over again. There seems to be a concerted campaign to destroy the international rules based order. Call it international law, call it international humanitarian law, ICJ, ICC, UN, human rights organizations, even liberation theology if you want to be biblical. A fragmentation by some of our political pygmies in the USA, across Europe, in Latin America, and certainly in the MENA or West Asia. And it frightens me. It also angers me because if we scuttle the very principles and institutions that have been honed over decades and that undergird international law, then we in the West are sapping our credibility and therefore the credibility of international law too. As a result, we end up sowing chaos. And chaos metastasizes in so many ways as it provokes hubris, impunity, violence, and ultimately nemesis. So, this is why I fear our global direction of travel if we allow this trend to continue unchecked and if we simply substitute facts with brazen lies. And here I'm reminded of the words of Saint Pope Paul VI. If you want peace, you must work for justice. And I'm also reminded, by the way, of the Jenin-born Palestinian Ali Jarbawi, formerly at Birzeit Uni and a minister in the Palestinian Authority during Salam Fayyad's premiership. He once said something that pretty much sums up my thinking as a negotiator. Peace cannot be bullied into existence. Indeed, our own Bertrand Russell reminded us too that war does not determine who is right, only who is left. June 2025. We need better diplomatic skills, a political transubstantiation of sorts. We need to stop the region from hurtling toward the abyss, or else the international rules-based order will be debased, defiled irretrievably, and we in the West will also be tarnished. Yet, as I near the end of this somewhat cathartic episode, I wonder, have we reached a stage where the pendulum has swung so wildly to one side that my exhortations will simply fall on deaf ears? I dread the answer to my own question from all those in positions of authority and leadership.